So, Lego M-Tron is actually pretty cool. So cool in fact, that I decided to make my very own MOC of perhaps the coolest set of this cool theme, the Mega Core Magnetizer. Now I am of course going to go over the MOC and all of its features, but I also want to talk about the creative process briefly because it was quite the doozy to try and build this one. Set 6989 Mega Core Magnetizer, or Multi-Core Magnetizer, originally released in 1990, and here I am some 30-ish years later trying to build my own version of it. So the biggest challenge about recreating this set was that the original used a lot of really big specialized pieces that A, don't exist anymore, and B, don't have any modern counterparts, so I had to do a lot of improvising, as I'm sure you can see. I think the most notable part of this challenge was with the canopy on the front, because on the original model, they uses this large piece that really makes up the whole front end of the vehicle, and I wasn't about to spend like $40 to $80 to get one. So thankfully I had these curved panel pieces in the trans neon green, and I knew I wanted to use those, but the big issue was how was I going to implement them? But it took a really long time to get it to be stable so that way it wouldn't fall apart if you looked at it funny. Same with the sort of top hatch here that covers the rest of the front end. Now I admit it doesn't quite have the same presence as the original Mega Core Magnetizer, but truthfully I'm just really glad that I got it to work at all. Now another thing that I had to make a concession on were the wheels. Now I only had a couple of the large space wheels that the original set had, not nearly enough to finish out the model. So I tried to find a comparable replacement. Initially I went with these Technic rims with the large rubber tires on them, but when I had them all together it didn't look chunky enough. I stumbled upon the remnants of my Power Miners Titanium Command Center, and so I just pilfered the wheels from the remains of that. And I think they really help give this thing the chunky, rugged look that it wants to have. Now while we're on the wheels, you'll notice that the original had 6 wheels, which I thought was pretty cool. But as I was building this, I kind of wanted to make it a little bit bigger. I see this little dish assembly up here. I don't know if it's supposed to be like a part of the engine or like a scanner or something. Doesn't really matter. On the original model, it turned as you steered the vehicle, and unfortunately I sort of forgot about that, and so possibly that could be added in the future. But aside from that, I'm really quite glad with how these little like shelves turned out. Now the cargo that can be stored on these little shelves can be moved from this big crane back here. The original set used magnet pieces, which of course don't exist anymore, so I instead just used the tried and true Lego hook system that's been around for quite some time. Now, I was actually quite fortunate to find this red crane boom. It was sitting in a bag of secondhand parts that I had forgotten about, and when I stumbled across it, I knew that it was just destined to be a part of this MOC. The boom itself can move up and down. It's held in place with some high friction Technic connectors. The little hook assembly also is able to slide back and forth on a Technic beam, and when extended pretty much all the way down, it can reach the ground from pretty much all angles. As for the rest of this section of the vehicle, it pretty much just functions as like a giant container. Extra shelves on the side for some smaller cargo. In the center of the original model, the two parts of the vehicle were held together by these hinge pieces. I didn't have them in the right colors, and truthfully I don't even know if they exist anymore. So I opted for a different connection system, and it actually works just as well, and it has just about the same range of motion as the original. Now, what is a classic space vehicle without some giant nonsensical rocket boosters? These types of details are maybe my favorite parts of some of the old space sets, because they really didn't make a whole lot of sense, but they did look super cool. And then we have this large hatch that opens and closes. So one of the primary functions of this vehicle is that it's going to be hauling stuff, right? So let's take a look at what exactly it's going to be hauling. We have a variety of cargo here. We have these two larger containers, one of which is sort of just like a storage container. This is like a tool chest and equipment locker. The original set also had this sort of like hose winch piece. I'm not entirely sure what the function of this would be. Maybe it's fuel, maybe it's oxygen, maybe it's for watering space plants, I don't know, but I had it, so I wanted to include it there. There's also some spots to hold some tools, and then there's some storage for the powerlifter backpacks. They don't fit in there super great, but it was the best I could do. Here we have a couple of the space container type pieces that can fit some smaller things, and we also have a larger crate here that I used to store the, I'm assuming they're supposed to be batteries that came with the M-Tron powerlifter CMF guys. And lastly we have this thing here, which I guess I sort of intended it to be maybe like a a portable generator or like a fuel pump or something, but mainly I just wanted some variety in the cargo that wasn't just more boxes. Also included in the original set were a couple of little vehicles, which I've tried to expand upon here. We have this little rover here, which I mostly based off of the design from the rover that came in the Galactic Explorer remake, but just with the M-Tron colors, and there's a couple of little spots to hold some tools on the back. We also have this slightly larger carry-all type rover, and you can use the bed to hold the cargo that's stored on the larger vehicle. Well, almost all of it. Now, in lieu of like this little flyer thing, I tried to do something of my own design, and I came up with this little like hover pod type thing. It was mostly inspired by the Tunnel Scout from the Rock Raiders line. Both of the rovers fit just about perfectly into the trailer back here, but unfortunately I couldn't really build a spot to store the little hover thingy. So, as I mentioned before, one thing that was really important to me, even though I didn't have the proper magnet pieces, was to sort of mirror the functionality of the original model. So the ground vehicles and all of the cargo can be picked up by the crane and moved around like wherever you need it to go. Another kind of interesting challenge about redoing this model is the original and a lot of sets of the time were very kind of blocky and angular, and while I think that adds a lot of the charm that these sets have, a lot of newer LEGO pieces have more like rounded and organic shapes. But I decided to embrace this and feature a lot of the rounded shapes more prominently on this model. So overall, building this MOC was an interesting experience, albeit a very frustrating one at times. But truthfully, I think that all of the struggling was worth it, because I am super happy with how this turned out, especially since I haven't built anything M-Tron related before. Thank you for taking the time to take a look at this MOC with me. Let me know what you think about it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!